We start this Briscoe Needs edition of SportsCenter with breaking news from the NBA. Giannis Antetokounmpo is headed to South Beach.
If at first you don't succeed, try and try and try and try again. That's pretty much been what the Miami Heat have been for the past handful of years. Because for years, it felt like every single NBA superstar was eventually linked to the Miami Heat. Whether that was Kevin Durant, Damian Lillard, Donovan Mitchell, Kyrie Irving, or James Harden, every single offseason, Heat fans were told to keep those jerseys ready, and every single time, that superstar ended up with someone else. But finally, after so many failed attempts, the Miami Heat finally got their star, because the Greek Freak is now taking his talents down to South Beach. Now, shout out to any of my viewers that are Miami Heat fans, because you guys should be excited. And I'm really curious to see how this all plays out. But we can't forget about all of those swings and misses that Miami took. So in this video, we're going to break down each and every superstar that Miami was linked to and how it all fell apart when they failed to close the deal. And if you stick around till the end of the video, I'll give you my overall thoughts on this Giannis trade. But before we continue, y'all know what to do. Hit that like button, subscribe, and hit that notification bell. Now, without further ado, let's get back to the video. Now, before we could talk about all of the stars that Miami failed to land, we need to understand why they were connected to those stars in the first place. Because for nearly 2 decades, the Miami Heat have been known as basketball's ultimate destination franchise. Ever since the arrival of LeBron James and Chris Bosh in 2010, Miami has carried a certain reputation around the league. If a superstar becomes unhappy, if a trade request becomes leaked, if a contract dispute starts brewing, eventually the Miami Heat get mentioned. And honestly, it makes sense, right? Let's just think about everything Miami has going for it. You have Pat Riley, one of the most respected executives in NBA history. A guy whose resume includes championships as a player, a coach, and an executive. When Pat Riley calls, players listen. Or at least they used to. And then you have Erik Spoelstra, who has gone from being one of the most underrated coaches in the league to arguably the best coach in basketball. No matter what roster he's given, Spoelstra somehow finds a way to make the Heat competitive. And then of course you have the location, South Beach. Warm weather, no state income tax, a market that's large enough to matter, but it doesn't come with the same pressure as a New York or a Los Angeles. And then there's that thing that Miami has spent years building its identity around, Heat culture. Whether you love the term or you roll your eyes every time it's mentioned, Heat culture became one of the strongest brands in sports. The idea that Miami keeps developing overlooked players, demands accountability, prioritizes conditioning, and expects everyone to buy into this team-first mentality. We've seen undrafted players become major contributors. We've seen role players earn massive contracts. We've seen teams that have no business reaching the finals, somehow, some way, finding themselves competing for championships. From the outside looking in, Miami looks like the perfect situation for any superstar. You get the lifestyle, the coaching, the organization stability, and of course you get a franchise that has proven time and time again that it can compete at the highest level. So now you can kind of understand why every single offseason started to feel the same. A superstar would become available, the rumors would start, the photoshops would appear, Miami Heat fans would convince themselves that this was finally the one, and to be fair, sometimes it looked like they had good reason to believe it. Because unlike other fan bases that create unrealistic trade fantasies, Miami actually had a history of making blockbuster moves happen. But the problem was after the Big Three era, the Heat slowly became something totally different. They became the team that always was in the conversation, always a finalist, the one that every insider mentioned, but more often than not, they weren't the team that actually landed the superstar. And no failed pursuit illustrates that better than Kevin Durant. See, back in 2022, Kevin Durant wasn't happy. I mean, what else is new? During that summer, Kevin Durant caused headlines by demanding a trade from the Brooklyn Nets. And it was during this whole trade request where KD listed 2 teams as his preferred destinations, and that was the Phoenix Suns and the Miami Heat, which should shock nobody as the Phoenix Suns and the Miami Heat were the 2 top seeds the season prior. And it was reported that the Heat would exhaust all stops in pursuit of Kevin Durant. They were willing to explore any and everything when it came to landing their superstar, because in their minds, this was the perfect co-star to team up with Jimmy Butler. Now, it was reported that the Nets wanted back Bam Adebayo and a plethora of picks, and it was because of this high asking price that Kevin Durant ended up not getting traded at all that summer. KD would oddly enough end up playing for the Brooklyn Nets in the 2022-23 season. But it was during that same season where the Nets would actually pull the trigger at the trade deadline. But the thing was, it wasn't to the Miami Heat. Instead, KD was headed to Phoenix. Now, in hindsight, you might be thinking maybe that's a good thing, because during this same season, the Miami Heat ended up making the NBA Finals as an 8th seed. But the thing is, one could only imagine the amount of pressure that someone like Kevin Durant could alleviate from Jimmy Butler if he was on the team. And yes, maybe they might not have Bam Adebayo, but a team with KD and Jimmy Butler would probably have been much better than an 8th seed. But the fact remains, the Miami Heat failed to land their superstar. Now, strangely enough, this wouldn't be the only time that Miami failed to land Kevin Durant. In fact, they were trying to land Kevin Durant since 2016. See, back in 2016, Pat Riley had landed one of those famous meetings in the Hamptons where KD took pitches from various teams. But unfortunately for the Heat and the league, KD of course ended up in Golden State. But Pat Riley is not a man that just gives up. So back in 2019, when KD left Golden State, once again he tried to recruit Kevin Durant. But once again, KD ended up with a different team, this time the Brooklyn Nets. And instead, Riley pulled off that sign and trade for Jimmy Butler that summer instead. So this brings us to the final attempt, the 2025 trade deadline. See, around this time, the Phoenix Suns were looking to move off of KD. They were out of the playoffs, they didn't have much success during the KD era, and it just seemed like it was time to move on. And on the other side of things, Miami had a disgruntled superstar in Jimmy Butler. So it seemed perfect for the Miami Heat and the Phoenix Suns to come together and make a trade where they swap these stars. Now, according to reports, in this proposed trade, KD would end up with the Miami Heat, and Josh Richardson and Jimmy Butler would end up in Phoenix, along with probably some more draft capital. But as we all know, this didn't end up happening, as Miami dealt Jimmy Butler to the Golden State Warriors. Now, what's crazy is even after Jimmy Butler got traded, there was still some pursuit of KD by the Miami Heat, as now any trade offer would now involve those pieces that were acquired in the Warriors trade for Jimmy Butler. It was reported that this trade would include Andrew Wiggins, Terry Rozier, Haywood Highsmith, and Jaime Jaquez Jr. This trade would also include the number 20 overall pick from the 2025 draft. And in return, Miami would end up with KD and Cody Martin. But just like every other time, Miami just couldn't close the deal, as Phoenix ended up going with Houston's offer because it contained more draft capital and more young talent such as Jalen Green. Now, Kevin Durant wasn't the first superstar that Miami failed to land, and he certainly wouldn't be the last, because history would repeat itself. Rumors, speculation, optimism, and ultimately, disappointment. Enter Donovan Mitchell. Now, the Heat's interest in Donovan Mitchell can be dated back all the way to the 2022 offseason, because at this time, the Utah Jazz were blowing it up, as they had already shipped off Rudy Gobert, and it was only a matter of time before they shipped off Donovan Mitchell as well. The Heat, of course, were very interested. They were coming off a season where they were the number 1 seed in the East, and they were looking to upgrade their team. But there was only one small problem. They literally had no assets. At the time, the Jazz were looking for future assets, and the Heat just simply didn't have that. So once the Heat submitted their proposal, it was quickly denied by Utah, because in their minds, the Knicks and the Cavs had much more to offer. as both of those teams could offer a plethora of future draft picks. If the Heat wanted to get this deal done, they would need a third team, but unfortunately, that third team just never came. As a result of this, Donovan Mitchell, of course, ended up with the Cavs, but it didn't stop the Miami Heat from continuing to pursue him, because in 2024, we would do this dance again. There was growing speculation that Donovan Mitchell might not sign his long-term extension with the Cleveland Cavaliers. So as a result, there were some teams that kept calling about trying to trade for the superstar. And one of those teams was the Miami Heat. But once again, unfortunately for the Miami Heat, the Cavs just weren't willing to do any business with anyone. They weren't willing to trade Donovan Mitchell. And that was because in their minds, they were very confident that they could persuade Donovan Mitchell to sign that long-term extension. And in the end, Donovan Mitchell remained a Cleveland Cavalier. So now that's two superstars that the Miami Heat have failed to land. And each time, it happened on multiple occasions. But see, the thing is, there's something very interesting about the 2023-24 season, because Donovan Mitchell was not the only superstar that the Miami Heat failed to land that very season. In fact, their pursuit of the other superstars during this season was even more disappointing. And that's because according to practically everybody, this deal was all but done. Now you might be wondering, who am I talking about here? Well, I'm talking about two superstars this time, in Damian Lillard and Bradley Beal. On July 1st, 2023, Damian Lillard did the unthinkable. He requested a trade away from the Trailblazers. Now, why is this significant? Well, for years, people were saying that Damian Lillard should leave the Trailblazers. And that's because the Blazers practically wasted his prime. They never really surrounded him with the proper talent to actually compete in the West. But no matter what the fans or the media said, Damian Lillard remained loyal because he wasn't the type of guy to run from the grind. Remember how annoying that was? But yeah, Damian Lillard spent 11 seasons in Portland wasting away his career. But once he saw the direction the Blazers were headed in during that offseason, he figured it was time to go. Now, according to Mark J. Spears, Dame's preference was the Miami Heat. So you have a superstar that wants to be traded, they tell you their preferred destination is Miami, so you would think this deal is practically done. And Miami would actively engage Portland with trade packages centered around Tyler Hero, Jaime Jaquez, and multiple draft picks. But just like with the Donovan Mitchell trade, the Heat's offer was simply not good enough. It was reported that Portland just simply wasn't interested in what Miami had to offer. For them, they were asking for either Jimmy Butler or Bam Adebayo to be included in the deal. But instead, the Heat tried to offer Nikola Jokic, cap relief, some pick swaps, up to 3 first-round picks, and Tyler Hero would end up on a third team. But again, the Blazers just weren't interested, which meant once again, Miami failed to land their superstar. Because Damian Lillard, he would end up in Milwaukee. Now, why did Portland like Milwaukee's offer so much? Well, it was because Portland viewed Milwaukee as an older roster and a non-desirable destination for free agent superstars, which in their eyes meant that the Bucks picks were going to be worth a lot more than the Miami picks. Portland also would end up with Drew Holiday on their roster, and they felt like Drew Holiday would be a much more valuable trade piece than Tyler Hero. Now, the Heat missing out on Dame caused them to get absolutely clowned, to the point where the good folks over at RDC World put together an absolutely hilarious skit around the whole situation. But what made this even worse is that Dame wasn't even the only star that Miami failed to land that same offseason, because they also missed out on Bradley Beal. Now, Beal made it clear, just like Dame, that he wanted to go to Miami. But in this case, it really wasn't Miami's fault, because the reason this deal never happened is because Bradley Beal was not willing to get rid of that no trade clause, which is understandable from Bradley Beal's perspective, but it's also very understandable from Miami's perspective. In their eyes, they want to be able to dictate where Bradley Beal would go if they needed to trade him in the future. And in all honesty, someone like Bradley Beal is just not the caliber of player that demands a no-trade clause. So the Heat went 0 for 2 during the 2023 offseason. But during that same exact year, though it was in the previous season, they went after another star. And that star was Kyrie Irving. In February of 2023, Kyrie Irving requested a trade out of Brooklyn for the second time. And I say second time because he did the same thing during the 2022 offseason. Now, why would he do this? Well, Kyrie Irving wanted a long-term contract extension, but the Brooklyn Nets weren't willing to give him that without some crazy incentives. Now, when this trade request came in, one of the teams that pursued Irving was none other than the Miami Heat. Now, it wasn't confirmed what the Miami Heat offered for Irving during this time, but it was rumored that the offer centered around Tyler Herro and future draft picks. Now, as is the theme in this video, Miami would fail to land their star, as Kyrie Irving ended up getting traded to the Dallas Mavericks instead. But this wouldn't stop the Miami Heat from once again pursuing Kyrie Irving during the 2023 offseason, because Kyrie was a free agent that summer. But once again, Miami was unable to pull this off. Kyrie ended up staying with the Dallas Mavericks. Now, if you're counting, that's 3 stars that Miami failed to land in one single offseason. Terrible luck. But there's one more star that they failed to land. And thankfully, it wouldn't be during the 2023 offseason. Instead, we gotta go all the way back to 2020. Because that was the year when the Heat failed to land James Harden. Now, around this time, it was no secret that James Harden wanted out from the Houston Rockets. He had spent years chasing a championship, but the team simply just wasn't good enough. Not to mention the front office turnover, where they got rid of Daryl Morey and also got rid of his favorite coach, Mike D'Antoni. And of course, when a superstar wants out of their situation, the Miami Heat are always rumored to be interested. But just like in other situations explained in this video, the Heat just simply didn't have the package that would be able to land James Harden, because they weren't going to get rid of Jimmy Butler or Bam, and Tyler Herro would be the only person that they could really include in this trade. But in all honesty, Tyler Herro being the centerpiece of a trade like this just wouldn't make any sense in this case. And it was also reported that the Rockets' asking price was just too high for Miami. So in the end, Miami couldn't land James Harden, as he would instead end up in Brooklyn with Kyrie and KD. Now this brings me to Giannis. Now this trade was a long time coming, because speculation about Giannis's exit started before the 2025-26 season even began. And it certainly didn't help that the Bucks played like absolute dog shit during this season. So after all that losing, the reports came out that Giannis reportedly wanted to be traded. And as we know, this saga was a back and forth affair to the point where people just honestly got tired of it. Like in my mind, it seemed like Giannis would never get traded at this point. But here we are. After failed attempt after failed attempt, Miami finally lands their superstar. So now that Giannis is officially part of the Miami Heat, what are my thoughts on this exactly? Well, in my opinion, there's a lot of good, but there's also some bad. Now, when it comes to the good, I see this team as an elite defensive unit. Honestly, borderline scary. Because now the Heat have Andrew Wiggins, Giannis, and Bam in the front court, and someone like Davion Mitchell in the backcourt. This team has size, they have athleticism, they have great point of attack defenders. So in my opinion, this team should be at the top of the league when it comes to defense. Now, unfortunately, the bad side of this trade is that the Miami Heat have absolutely no depth, which is honestly expected when you trade for a superstar. So it's going to be very interesting to see how Miami rounds out this roster, but I'm very hesitant to call them a championship team just yet. But the most important thing here is that Miami finally closed the deal. This time, they didn't almost do it, they actually got it done. Because for years, Miami was the king of almost. Almost landing Kevin Durant, almost landing Donovan Mitchell, almost landing Damian Lillard, almost landing Bradley Beal, almost landing Kyrie Irving and James Harden. Every offseason and every trade deadline seemed to follow the same pattern. A superstar becomes available, Miami got linked to them, Heat fans start dreaming, and then someone else walked away with the prize. And after a while, it starts becoming the franchise's identity. And we saw it over the years. There started to be questions about Pat Riley. Was he washed? Was Heat culture good enough to close the deal? And it seemed like the answer was no. But then Giannis happened. Not Durant, not Donovan Mitchell, not Damian Lillard, not any of the other guys that I mentioned in this video, but Giannis. And what's crazy is that for a moment, it seemed like this actually wouldn't happen. It seemed all but confirmed that Giannis was headed to Boston, but this time it was Miami that swooped in and they walked away with the prize. But let me know your thoughts in the comments. Who do you think was the biggest swing and miss that Miami had over the years? And what are your overall thoughts when it comes to the Giannis trade? Let me know. And of course, if you've made it this far in this video, show some love. Give it a like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell. Also, if any of the videos on your screen pique your interest, go ahead and check them out. And of course, thank you for hanging with me today. It's been Dre, and these have been my thoughts. Until next time.